Very much, Keith. Keith done a load of work to get this ready for today. Thank you very much. Okay, he said, I'll try and keep this short because we've got a busy day ahead of us. Ha ha. So chairing the executive of Green Liberal Democrats over the last 3 years has been a great privilege, but also a great responsibility. Just a few years ago, we were trying to save the party. Our polling was in single figures and we'd lost so many of our dedicated local councillors. Our Westminster presence relied heavily on our peers. Long-time friend and Green Liberal Democrat stalwart Catherine Bearder was our only MEP. But let me pause for a moment to thank all of our executive who have worked so hard to get us where we are and made it possible to put on today's event. So trying to define and interpret our aims and make them real has been uphill at times, but our achievements have been many. It's taken some work and fine-tuning to accommodate a growing number of local councillors on the Green Liberal Democrat executive. But now, of course, we've got an MEP. Maybe we're going to have to hold our executive meetings in Brussels. Yeah. or maybe in Strasbourg. Or maybe in both. Our focus has moved from noting problems and sometimes suggesting solutions to using our progressive and liberal approach to the environment to gain power and to use that political power to protect our planet. We are not the Green Party and we are not a party of the left where all must be subsumed into what is best for all. We are liberals and we value the individual, we value the outlier. We value the individual, we value the outlier, the radical. And because we are liberals, we don't just tolerate those outside the mainstream, we champion them. Green Liberal Democrat membership is approaching 1% of the party membership. We fully expect to have signed our 1,000th member by our Bournemouth conference. So ask not, what will Green Liberal Democrats look like? Ask not what will Green Liberal Democrats look like if we have 5% of party membership, but instead ask what would the Liberal Democrat Party look like if 5% of the membership were Green Liberal Democrats. This is a really easy audience, thank you very much. And I'm just a warm-up. So there is some light in the darkness that is the permanent wave of bad news about our environment. So we finally reached a place where many of the population are beginning to realise that it is time to stop talking and time to start acting. Our country needs a political party that can lead on tackling the problems that we face. And our party needs a grassroots organisation that can make the environmental ethos running throughout our party and understand the technicalities and sharing the practicalities. The time has come for Green Liberal Democrats to share best practice and to push our environmental agenda harder and faster. We've already begun to plan our Bournemouth conference. Last year, our fringes were packed, and consequently this year we're going to be looking for larger venues. And it's a measure of our success that at one of our fringe events at Spring Conference in York earlier this year, I couldn't find a seat. Well, the problem was that it was me who was supposed to be chairing the event. And that'll certainly teach me to turn up late. But on the subject of conference, I've just got to calm things down a little bit and take a moment to remember. This year, we lost a member. Someone who I only ever saw at conference. She couldn't come to Brighton last year because of ill health. And it was only in her absence that we realised what a key member she was. Jennifer Ware. I know some of you will have known Jennifer. A member of Kensington and Chelsea Liberal Democrats, was a regular at our stall. She was prepared to sit at our stand, allowing others from the executive to go to fringes, to attend some of the many meetings, or rarely even take a break. Her support was immense, and Jennifer, you were loved, and we will miss you. At Bournemouth this year, we've decided to start making an annual presentation to someone who's helped Green Liberal Democrat over the last 12 months. And we're going to call it the Jennifer Ware Award. Last sheet, I promise you. Our party, from the grassroots to our leadership, understands the challenge facing us. long after the Jean Monnet European project has been forgotten, the measures that we plan and undertake to protect this planet will stand as a testimony to the work of the brave souls who stood up as outliers and held the line that the earth matters. Now, as a local councillor, I'm regularly reminded of the limit of our reach, but we can make a difference, and we must make a difference. Green Liberal Democrats has changed. We're trying to focus on providing the know-how, the skills, and give the confidence to allow us to act and inspire. For our party, the time is now, and for us to be proud of our commitment to the environment. So please, seek out environmental groups in your area. Ask them what help they need. Ask your local party to incorporate their needs into their work. Then please share your experiences with our colleagues in Green Liberal Democrats. So today, please enjoy, please ask questions, please listen, please take notes, please network, but most of all, be prepared to take what you've learned back to your local areas. So if you're a member of Green Liberal Democrats, thank you very much for your support. If you're not, I know you can join at the stall over there. We've had a couple of members joining already this morning. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for coming along. Thank you for giving your time, and thank you for your contribution to this conference. Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to hand over to Vera. Vera, straight over to you. Thank you for our MP for Bath. Thank you.
So good morning, everybody. It's incredibly uplifting to see such a room full of dedicated Liberal Democrats and Liberal Democrats committed to the environment. And as has already said today, we have been at the forefront of campaigning for changes in the way we actually live and look at our planet. And we need to continue to have this momentum. Everybody knows that since the IPCC report, suddenly in the last 6 months, really, the environment and climate change has come to the forefront of the attention in this country and worldwide, and that is a good thing. I'm the spokesperson now for climate change for the Liberal Democrats, and I've taken this very seriously and really used the last 4 months to inform myself and meet with many organisations and with our own party members to develop a policy where we Liberal Democrats can stand and proudly be at the forefront and progressive and radical about how we are actually getting to that challenge of 2050 to be net zero greenhouse gas emissions. I have labelled my presentation as 2045 because that is really where we as Liberal Democrats think we can be at. And I've already heard this morning, can't we be a bit more ambitious? Can't we actually follow the Green Party with their 2035 target? Will we not look a little bit lame if we only say 2045? And I hope I can set the scene today for you having these discussions, but really very much engage in the arguments of what is realistically achievable, and that we as a party of evidence are always the ones who are actually carry forward, because we evidence things and we don't just do things out of the stomach. We know with Brexit how in what dangerous waters we get when we are just following populists and say the popular things without actually being able to evidence it. And I hope you will engage in the argument why we think currently, I know Duncan Bruck is coming this afternoon, believe 2045 is a serious target. It is very difficult, and if you follow my slideshow you will see actually what the challenge is and why we believe 2045 is a realistic thing to say. What I do believe we should do, we should set very tough interim targets, and not just get there to 2040 and think, whoops, we've missed the target, or we are missing the way to get there. So the challenge is really set a realistic target at the end, but set very tough, challenging targets between now. What can we do now? What can we do in a year's time, in 5 years' time, in 2030, and so on. And you will see how difficult that will already be. So please bear with me and engage in the argument, while I believe this is really 2045 is already a very challenging target. So here is a scenario that the WWF has set out, which we believe, and we are following the WWF with a 2045 target. That is the scenario setting. They have produced this scenario by actually doing some research, and which gives us a very good sense of the factors. There are three things I want you to notice. First, that in some sectors we can, with our existing technologies, cut emissions to zero or almost zero. Second, that in some sectors there will continue to be some emissions unless there is some major technological changes. Technological changes. It's early in the morning. Technologisch. Yeah, that's right. I've lived in this country for 30 years and there's still some things that I cannot pronounce. That we will need to use some negative emissions method to take carbon dioxide out of the air. So look at that a little bit, take a bit of time. So these are the things that I want you to notice. We can achieve some things, for example with power, probably quite quickly. We can do things definitely with heating, but there are things where we will have remaining emissions, and those are the big challenges. And if you look, think about the Climate Change Act that was passed in 2008 with an 80% target, the most difficult thing will be the last 20%, and that is really where the challenge lies. So let's go into sectors where we can cut emissions to zeros. Electricity generation from renewable energy resources. Complications include supplying energy consistently, even on days when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. But that can be solved with improved methods of storage, or also actually by thinking about overproduction. This government is always thinking about just producing enough energy for the day, rather than thinking, let's actually overproduce and then store. And these are the sort of options, and these are the decisions that are going to be made at a high level. Surface transport. All passengers' cars can run off electricity or hydrogen. Again, these are going to be the big decisions that are going to be made. And I had a breakfast meeting with the automotive industry, and they said we might look at hydrogen for heavier vehicles, or sort of trains, buses, lorries, where electric vehicle technology is probably better for passenger cars. But again, you will find very soon that these big discussions are going to be had. Is it hydrogen? Is it electricity? Is it a mixture? And where are we going to put our resources? And then also where we can actually achieve carbon zero is heating. All boilers can run off electricity or hydrogen, but again, it depends on where the government actually sets the signals, and the industry sets across the board. If only government would actually make decisions quickly and set some signals of where they want to go, because then we can go ahead with it. So, sectors where we can reduce emissions, but the technology does not exist to remove emissions entirely. And that is aviation. There is not yet known a replacement for jet fuel. Some industries, certain industrial processes, for example plastics, will always involve some emissions. And plastics is, as much as it's being vilified now, is actually an incredibly useful product. It's incredibly durable. We have it in almost every product that we use now. For example, our clothes. It is everywhere, and to completely eliminate plastics from our world is probably not going to happen. So these are the sectors where probably we cannot reduce emissions to zero. And then a last one is agriculture. The biggest problems are cows. People thought for a long time it's cows pooping, but farting is actually cows burping. So, and you know, they will continue to burp. So as in every scenario, there will be some greenhouse gas emissions. We will also need to invest heavily in so-called negative emissions. There are two basic methods of doing this. Planting forests. This is nature's tried and tested method. Photosynthetics takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, as we know. The problem is basically one of space, and where is this massive reforestation actually going to happen? We cannot offset enough carbon emissions even just through forests. So the next one then is a technological method, taking carbon dioxide out of the air and storing it into the ground. This is known in the jargon as direct air capture with carbon storage, or DACS. Currently the technology for this is not developed, and it looks likely to be very expensive and require a lot of energy. So we need to produce a lot of energy in order to actually make that technology happen. So these are all the challenges. So as I said before, I think what we should really do, rather than setting an unrealistic target for the end game, i.e. net zero greenhouse gas emissions at a date that I don't believe is realistic, and in fact experts don't believe are realistic, we should go and set very tough interim targets. If we do seem to be on course to get to net zero before 2045, of course we can reset our targets and reverse, because this is obviously a dynamic process. But I think currently the realistic thing to do is look at 2045, but set very tough interim targets and know exactly what can be done already in a year's time, for example. For example, the government could stop fracking today. It is something that we have been asking for a long time in Parliament. We had a discussion about it, but the government is currently not prepared not to look into fracking as an interim fuel. And while 2050 with 80% target, fracking had a reason to be in the mixture as a transition fuel, now that we have a much tougher target to get to net zero, fracking really should be out of that scenario, and we should say today, or government could say today, we are going to not invest further into fracking. So that's just one example, but of course there are other interim targets that go to 25, 30 and so on and so forth, and I think we as Liberal Democrats, we should do that. We should set very tough interim targets, set our goal to 2045, because we believe that is a realistic scenario, rather than going out following a Green Party or Extinction Rebellion, so we can all do this in 2025 or 2035 because it's a popular thing to do. We as a party have always been basing what we believe in and what we campaign for on evidence base. So my last slide is about political challenges. So the first one obviously is inertia. I'd say when I listen to debates in Parliament, we don't have climate change deniers anymore. There might be a niche thing that people do, climate change denying, but really our biggest challenge is the climate change delayers, the people who say, oh, we are sort of doing okay, don't worry about it, we'll get there anyway. So inertia, not doing things quickly enough, which is again why I think the interim targets are going to be such a crucial thing, so that people know that we have to do something from today and have achieved something by next year. So second, of course, we need to take a positive cooperative approach when working with the business community. We are relying on business to find innovative solutions to many of the problems we need to solve. But we also cannot be naive about the realities of tackling vested interests. There are significant differences between our approach and what, for example, the fossil fuel lobby wants. And we need to be smart with fighting these battles and pick our battles. And thirdly, and most importantly, some of these things that will have to happen to transition to net zero risk placing an unfair burden on those who can least afford it. Much of our approach will be about providing incentives to people, for example, incentivizing them to drive electric cars or to make the houses more efficient. But at the crunch, we will also have to be tough, using the stick alongside the carrot, and when we do so, we need to make sure we do this in a fair way. We do not want to end up slapping punitive taxes on the most vulnerable. So we need to put serious thought into how to achieve social justice at the same time. And this morning already I was approached to say just that. We can achieve other things alongside getting to net zero. For example, also health benefits, of course. So, we could, for example, use this as having much healthier transport systems in place than we currently do. Just transitioning people from petrol cars into electric cars, we might miss actually an opportunity for doing encouraging people for much more active transport, like walking or cycling. So there are other opportunities which give us a win-win with this challenge that we have. So, for example, also fuel efficiency or heating efficiency, people can actually ultimately save money. But we need to do this in a smart way. We Lib Dems are known to do things in the smart way. So have a very good day today. Let's discuss this. Let's discuss it in a very realistic way. Thank you for listening, and let's get there to 2045. I've seen Duncan is in the room, and I'm sure you'll have plenty of discussions about our 2045 target. Thank you.
Thank you Vera, and I did say it was a soft audience. You're getting an applause for using a German word.
Yeah.
Demonstrates
Can
that.
you practice that? Can you practice
Please.
Technologie. Technologie.
Technologie. Let's hear it. Technologie.
Excellent.
Very
Thank
good.
you. You can all learn German, I'm sure you can.
So thanks ever so Vera. Without further ado, as I mentioned in my short speech earlier, we've got a member of our executive who is now an MEP, and of course we've got a member who is also an MEP. So Jane Brophy and Bill Newton-Dunn, please come down to the front here and join me. And Jane, if you just want to say a few words, that would be fine. You can just take a couple of minutes, or you can take as long as you like. Like I said, we've got a very soft audience.
How much time can I have?
How much time can you have? It started already. They're in the palm of your hands. I'll do this when it's time to go. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Bill.
Where should we see?
That's good.
I'm going to be facing her anyway. Just go.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for being here. The thing I want to add to what Vera's already said as your new MEP for the North West, because what I want to stress to you is that we're facing a climate change emergency. And I think sometimes this issue of the fact this is an emergency is sometimes lost in all the information about how to get to zero carbon by particular timescales. This is an emergency and it demands an emergency response, and that should be what we're saying as Liberal Democrats. Because I actually personally still think there's a way to go in convincing some of our colleagues. I know in this room we're all Green Liberal Democrats, we're all here because the environment and climate change and biodiversity, these are the issues we feel most passionately about. Vera made the right links in terms of linking climate change to social justice, and she also linked climate change to health. And actually there's two reasons why that's important. The first reason is because pollution affects everybody's health, and the second reason is because it's only if people have a sense of well-being that they can change and make the changes that are required to combat the climate change emergency. So here I stand. I'm going to be brief because I think I'm going to be moved on to the next speaker. I was told a couple of minutes. Now, there have been times when people have told me I've been too green to be elected. The history is there, and I would like to say to people here, you cannot be too green to be elected. You just cannot be, because we know what the science is. Vera talked about the evidence base. We all understand the evidence base. We've heard from people like David Attenborough. He understands the science. He understands what's happening to our world. He understands what's happening to biodiversity. This is an emergency when somebody like David Attenborough is saying what he's saying. We've heard from Greta Thunberg, the young woman from Sweden. She is an amazing inspiration. She's mobilised our young people. She has articulated what perhaps the adults are unable to articulate. We need to be connecting with young people. We need to be connecting to what people like Greta Thunberg is saying. This is a climate change emergency, as I'm saying. So what I'd like to finish on is you cannot be too green to be elected. We need to just make sure that that is known. There is still, within some parts of the Liberal Democrats, a view that, perhaps climate change emergency isn't sort of sexy enough, it's not the main thing at the moment. Obviously the main thing for me and my mandate is to stop Brexit, but we're stopping Brexit because we want to save the planet, because we want to tackle the climate change emergency. That's why we're stopping Brexit, because we've got a mission, we've got a mandate. I'm happy to take questions. I could probably talk for ages here, but we've probably got an agenda to get through. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, okay. I thought Jane wanted some questions. I'll go for
question if you want one.
Well, I'll say a couple of words, then you can ask Jane. Just say, I'm Bill, I'm the local MEP. When Graham said we've got an MEP, I don't know if he meant me, but we've actually got 16, which is tremendous. Very exciting. So I want to say thank you to Jane for trekking all the way from the northwest, which is a long way away. Well, she's actually come from Stockport, which is the edge of Derbyshire. So, and where's Vera? Thank you for coming all the way from Bath, which is fantastic as well. So we appreciate it very much indeed. I don't want to say very much at all. Just that when Vera said awareness is growing of green issues, it reminded me maybe 15 years ago when I was still the MEP, the Friends of the Earth invited me to a town hall meeting in Retford, and they hired the big room in the town hall and said, let's have a public meeting and discuss this thing. And nobody came. And so I felt very embarrassed for them, so we went to the pub together to pass the evening. But that, for me, was a measure of how this thing has accelerated as something in the public's eye. In the European Parliament, if you've studied the recent results of the elections, we Liberals are a strong third group, which is very good. We've strengthened since the last Parliament, which is very important. But the Greens have also strengthened in the Parliament, and they're now a powerful fourth group, which is just another measure that the Green movement is growing. You remember it started in Germany, I think, with acid rain destroying some of their trees in the forest. So we said, oh, well, that's just German pollution. But it wasn't. It was a worldwide effect beginning and noticed by the Germans first. And now we're all aware, so we've got an enormous job in front of us, because when our kids and our grandchildren say to us, what are you going to do about this? What did you do to save the world while you had a chance? We've got to have something to reply, that we actually took action and didn't just sit there enjoying life. Finally, the clock isn't moving at all, which is I've got unlimited time, Graham. Thank you.
It's going backwards, Bill.
Right. Finally, just a little story. I was talking at a school a few months ago, and the kids couldn't think of any questions after I finished my talk. So I said to them, "Okay, look, you've all got 1 hour left to live. How will you spend your final hour of your life?" You've heard the story, have you? No.
Don't get ideas.
And one of the kids said, okay, what I'd do, mister, is I'd use my last hour to visit the Queen in Buckingham Palace. And I said, okay, that's a terrific, very good example. And another kid put up their hand and said, I'd meet David Attenborough. And I thought that's a terrific example. And a little shy girl at the back put up her hand and said, please sir, I'd spend my last hour listening to you talk. So I said, I can't believe you really said that. Why on earth did you say that? Well, she says, every minute you speak feels like another hour.